the fundamental thing of having these 2-month legs with a bunch of scientists that didn't necessarily know each other, I mean, that has always been the same. And that has been one of the most wonderful things about it, because it's like a little university at sea. And, graduate students get to know famous professors, and everybody gets to know everybody, and it's just wonderful. It makes a career. My name is Rodey Batiza, and my role in scientific ocean drilling began when I was a graduate student and went entirely throughout my career. The drilling program and my career have been going hand in hand from the beginning. Well, I was born in Mexico and lived in Mexico until I was 11. My father was a vice president of a bank, and my mother was a housewife. And when I was 11, my father decided that he wanted to become a law school professor. So we moved to New Orleans. He became a law professor at Tulane University. And I started speaking English instead of Spanish. When I was a little kid, I had a rock collection and a mineral collection, and I loved that. I started that in Mexico. And then when I moved here, I continued collecting rocks. But when I was an undergraduate student, I flunked out of college. I got poor grades, and they told me to leave. This was 1967. I realized that if I wasn't in college, I would soon be drafted to go to Vietnam. So instead, I joined the Navy. I joined submarines, and I was in submarines for several years. And then when I was going to get out, I was wondering what would I do now? Would I go back to college or do something else? And I decided I would go back to college, but I would major in something that I picked out of a hat, because I had so many interests. I was always switching around to do this and that, and philosophy and romantic poetry and English and engineering and physics, and so I picked geology, and I decided that whatever I picked, I would at least get a bachelor's degree, and so that's what I did. But then, when I was finished with geology, I realized that you could do geology in the ocean and go to sea, which I loved going to sea. I loved being in the ocean, and I realized I could put the two things together and study the geology of the ocean floor. So then I applied to graduate school and went to Scripps, and then became a marine geologist. Oh, the environment was just fabulous. I mean, for me, it was just a dream come true, because I was older than most students. I'd been in the Navy, so I already knew a little bit about the world. And what I found at Scripps was that there were just amazing opportunities for students. So I could get shipped, I could write proposals to get a ship and do research all by myself, and I had faculty advisors, but I was like a free agent, really. And so I just went crazy. And at first I was a teaching assistant, then I became a research assistant, but I was assigned to DSDP. So I became a research assistant at DSDP, and we just did research. That got me introduced to all the people that had to do with the drilling program at Scripps. Through them, I met other people. And then eventually I was invited to participate in a drilling leg after I graduated. I studied oceanic volcanism. And so I was very interested in the mantle source that produced mid-ocean ridge volcanoes versus hotspot volcanoes versus other kinds of volcanoes in the ocean. And so Leg 61, Leg 61 was interesting because it was supposed to drill the oldest seafloor that was available to drill. It was Jurassic in age, based on magnetic anomalies. And so the idea was to go and drill and see if anything was different back then. So we went there and we drilled it, Nauru Basin. After a little bit of sediment, we got into this very fresh volcanic rock that was much younger than predicted. And we drilled almost a kilometer of that and never got to the bottom of it. So the results were totally unexpected. And so that was very exciting. You know, you spend 2 months at sea together, you know, you become friends and colleagues. And those are the people that after that, they hired me in their departments. I had sabbaticals in France with people that we traded houses. I graduated from Scripps in 1977. And then I worked for 9 years at Washington University in St. Louis. And then I went to Northwestern and then University of Hawaii for 12 years. And meanwhile, in 84, 7 years after my PhD, I did a rotator at NSF for 1 year in drilling. The rotatorship was just an interruption. You know, it was something that I did because I had promised them that I would do it if they needed me. When I was leaving graduate school, I met a guy at Woods Hole. He was from NSF. He was there kind of on a sabbatical. And he said, Rodey, you know, you should come to NSF. And I said, well, I'd love to do that, but, you know, right now I just have a new job and, you know, I need to get tenure and everything and publish papers and do her. But, you know, after that, after I get tenure, if you want me to come to NSF. And the day after I got tenure, I got a phone call. Hey, Rodey, you got tenure, didn't you? And so then I said, sure, I can come to NSF for a year. And they had a thing at NSF that not all good scientists can be good program managers. And they thought I had good people skills, that, you know, you could talk to me and I was okay and I wasn't a jerk. And, you know, I could just be a regular person. And so that was important at NSF because, you know, you're there to help people. And so, you know, I enjoyed doing that. You know, it's like helping students. I mean, same thing, kind of. I learned that you have to be careful what you say. You know, you have to be careful what promises you make because people always remember. And, you know, you have to make sure that everybody understands the rules, how things work, and that, you know, you don't pick favorites. You know, there's a process and a review process and a panel process. And I realized it was very important to be available to people for questions and everything. So I always encourage people to call me. You know, if they have an idea for something they want to do, call me, let's talk about it. Maybe I can help you with it somehow. And so it was fun. You know, I enjoyed it. I loved going to sea. You know, I've spent, you know, 6 or 7 years of my life at sea. You know, lots of expeditions, some drilling, but many not. And I love going to sea. I love studying the ocean, you know. And with drilling, you can study the third dimension, which is, you know, impossible otherwise. So it's very exciting. When I first started going to sea as a graduate student, I used to get ship time that I used to write little proposals, and I'd get a ship for a week and I could go and do something. And all the crew members at that time, long ago, didn't like the scientists. They called us effing scientificos. And so they used to call me that. And I said, listen, you idiot, I was in the Navy for 6 years. Don't call me that. I'm just like you. What? Okay. And so then a lot of the crew members on the ships knew that I was ex-Navy, and, you know, they could talk to me about things, and I was okay. And so then when I started going to sea as an academic, at the end of every cruise, I would have a big party for the crew. You know, in Mexico or wherever we were, I'd rent a bar and get food, and I'd have this, you know, it cost a couple $1,000, so what? And, you know, have this huge party, and all the crew would come. And so then it became like, oh, are you going to go on Rodey's cruise? and people used to, you know, be in competition to give me their shift so that I could have a party. Oh. Well, that's why the captain didn't mind marrying me at sea, because he knew me well from lots of cruises. After my time in Hawaii, my wife and I had a son who we decided should learn that he has to wear shoes. So we decided we would move back to the mainland, and it just so happened that at the time there was a position at NSF that was open, and so I called my old friend at NSF and said, well, I think I'm moving to the mainland. Do you think I could be eligible for this position that's available? He said, yes. And so, you know, and I'd been in academia for over 20 years. I thought, you know, I've gotten millions of dollars from NSF. You know, maybe I can give back, just give back. And, you know, so I wanted to give back to the community, which had been so nice to me. And so I thought, this is perfect. There were hardly any people that came to NSF at the end of their career the way I did. I mean, that's very unusual. Most people go to NSF early in their careers, stay at NSF, sometimes for their whole career. So it was very unusual to have somebody come in after 20 years in academia, come to NSF. I mean, the director and assistant director looked at my CV and said, whoa, you know, what is this? You know, what's this guy doing? In NSF, the program managers have a lot of power and authority to determine how to spend money. And so what that means is that you want the program managers to be good scientists themselves, because if they're not good scientists, they won't make good scientific decisions about spending. So it's always nice to have somebody who's a good scientist be a program manager. So that was my advantage, and that's why, I think they liked me. When I first went to NSF, when I was a rotator in 1984, I went to MG&G. So when I went back in 1999, I went to MG&G, and I was in MG&G for 3 or 4 years. And then my boss retired, and he was in charge of MG&G and drilling. So when he retired, I applied for his position, and I was successful. And so then I was in charge of MG&G and drilling, both. And so that's how I became involved with drilling. Bruce was a very amazing person. Very, very smart. Really, really smart. And quiet. He didn't talk very much. He would mostly sit in a meeting and not say anything, but he's listening to everything and thinking about everything and having opinions about everything. But he talked softly and never was very loud. He was a very good person to talk to, you know, because you could learn a lot from watching what he did, but also from just talking to him, you know. So we'd go to lunch together, you know, almost every day and, you know, talk about stuff. And then on Fridays we'd have beers, you know, in the afternoon after work. He was just a very amazing person. Just cared a lot about science, cared a lot about good science, you know, spending money wisely. Well, he was in charge of ODP, and he was the one who did the transition from ODP to IODP, Integrated Ocean Drilling Program. And so that was with the Japanese and with ECORD, and he was the one really that put that together and wrote the MOU with Japan and did all the negotiation with the Japanese on how to put the program together, how to make the scientific advisory structure and the governance and all that. He did that. That was his creation. So he built something that was very well built. You know, the structure of it was very carefully thought out, and it wasn't too different from the previous drilling. So it was very intelligently put together.
Did you learn something from Bruce Malfait that you later applied to your work?
Oh, everything. Sure. I mean, I learned everything from him. Well, him and another guy who was his boss, his name was Don Heinrichs. He was the division director of ocean sciences for a long time. And he and Bruce were sort of had a partnership. And they had things they cared about a lot. Heinrichs cared a lot about seismology and having seismic ships. Bruce cared a lot about drilling, but that also required lots of seismic information. So together they sort of ran MG&G and drilling together for probably 30 years. It was toward the end of the last few years of the Integrated Ocean Drilling Program, and then the beginning, the planning stages for the second IODP. The creation of that was mostly up to me and my colleagues from the international community, you know, different funding agencies. So the MEX people, the people from Europe, the people from other member countries, you know, Korea and Brazil, and we would have these meetings of IODP Council and plan the future and set up the MOU and all that. And then we had a new MOU, which didn't include Japan because we couldn't agree. I mean, we couldn't agree on some fundamental things. We were still all working together very cordially. You know, we had friendships, important friendships amongst all of the people that were, you know, it was 30 or 40 people in the IODP Council from all the different countries. And everybody got along very well with everybody else. Once it became impossible to have an MOU, we started thinking specifically about what we could do that would be next best. And so next best would be having a section of things that we agreed on as part of the MOU, but it wouldn't be signed by MEXT, but it would be signed by ECORD and the US and the other member countries. And Japan, we had the section that we had negotiated with the Japanese that they were okay with it too. So In a way, we sort of still had an MOU, sort of. We still had CHICU as part of the program, ECORD, and I think in retrospect, the transition from the first IODP to the second IODP was probably pretty good. At the time that IODP, the second IODP started, the JR had been rebuilt. It was a brand new ship, really. And CHICU was doing great, MSPs were doing great, very successful. And, you know, we had enough money to do everything pretty well. So, I mean, I think it was about as good as it could have been, given the resources that we had. And, you know, it was a 10-year program. So it definitely had a start and a finish year. And when it got to the end, the big question was, will it be renewed? You know, will there be a third IODP or whatever you want to call it? And that's when things began to look pretty bad. I think we did the best we could collectively, you know. You know, when a bowl of soup costs, you know, $5, and you've only got $3, you know, you can't buy a bowl of soup anymore. And so, I mean, that was the problem, really. It's just a money problem. If you look at the history of ocean drilling program, the scientific discoveries that have been made with drilling, I mean, it's one of the most successful scientific endeavors of all time. I mean, the number of science papers, the number of nature papers is unmatched. You know, take any NASA mission, take any, you know, NOAA mission. I mean, this has been better than any of them. You know, the community is pretty smart. You know, the community is pretty, international community is pretty resourceful. So, you know, we'll just have to see. You know, things could be good again. So, I mean, it's been so successful, it would be a shame if it didn't come back. Oh, well, I mean, it's just been so wonderful. You know, I mean, I can't believe they paid me to do this. You know, they actually paid me to have all this fun. You know, enjoyment and wonderful students, wonderful colleagues, internationally, mostly from the drilling program. You know, not only in my scientific career in academia, but even at NSF, you know, still wonderful colleagues internationally and from different funding agencies and Japan and, you know, friends. So, a huge gift. Very wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, I feel very fortunate.